The story opens with a modest, content household. Michael is a happy parent who has a lovely wife and an intelligent kid. For the last 10 years, he has been a successful insurance salesman. It's interesting to note that Michael worked as a police officer for 7 years before to entering the insurance industry, but it's unclear why he left. Like every other day, Michael's wife dropped him off at the train station so he could make his regular trek to work. He had been riding the same train for 10 years, and he knew most of the people there. Some had even become close friends. But when he got to work, things didn't go as planned. What had begun as a sunny and delightful day soon turned dark when Michael's supervisor called him into the office and abruptly and mysteriously dismissed him. Without providing a clear reason or citing any misconduct on his side, his job contract was terminated. He felt as if 10 years of his life had been wasted, particularly because he was just 5 years away from retirement, and at 60, it seemed impossible to find another job. Furthermore, neither Michael nor his spouse had any savings nor emergency money put up. They need funds for their child's schooling as well. Michael decided to go to a pub and have a drink in order to drown his sorrows. There, he unintentionally crossed paths with Alex Murphy, a former police colleague who served as his partner. He also bumped across Captain Hauer, a fellow police buddy who had attained the rank of captain, at that tavern. Later, Michael took the customary train home. He unexpectedly ran into someone while boarding and was shocked to see that they had taken his phone out of his coat pocket. Sadly, the train had already begun to move by the time he recognized it, so he was unable to stop the robber. Michael took a seat in the rear of the train compartment and started reading a book as he tried to get over the experience. Abruptly, a lady by the name of Jonah sat down in front of him and started talking. After a while, she challenged him, offering him a $100,000 reward if he could find Pry before the train arrived at Cold Spring Station. In addition, Michael needed to covertly place a tracking device into a backpack that Pry, a regular passenger, was carrying. Jonah had already hidden $25,000 as a down payment in the rear lavatory of the carriage, unlike Michael, who was a frequent passenger. This challenge came with one very tight requirement. Michael was not allowed to tell anybody anything about it. At the first stop, Jonah got off, leaving Michael a little confused about this strange assignment. But considering his urgent financial issues, Michael decided to accept the $25,000 when he found it in the bathroom. He intended to get off at the next stop without bothering to look for Pry. But just as Michael was getting ready to get off the train, a little child approached him and gave him an envelope, telling him that he had to finish what he had begun. His wife's wedding band was in the mail. Suddenly, he realized that his family was in grave danger and that Jonah had forced him to find Pry. Michael tried desperately to reach his wife using a phone he had stolen from a fellow traveler. However, the call failed to connect. He then attempted to get in touch with Murphy, but Murphy was also unreachable. Michael was so distraught that he recorded a message outlining his issue. Then he went over to a fellow passenger he knew, Walt, and explained the scenario to him using a note he found in the newspaper Walt was reading. When they got to the next stop, Michael asked Walt for assistance in reporting this to the authorities. Walt got the message and got off at the next stop. Jonah abruptly contacted Michael on the forbidden phone, accusing him of disobeying the rules by telling Walt about the challenge, which she said would result in Walt's demise. A terrible scene came into view as Michael peered out the window. Walt was going to cross the road when a bus shoved him violently and hit him. Michael was now unable to ask for assistance from anybody. He eventually started doing what Jonah had instructed, although grudgingly. He started by carefully going over each punched rail ticket in an attempt to find someone by the name of Pry. A customer was traveling to Cold Spring Station if their ticket had a hole at number 7. Michael examined each train car in detail before focusing on a select group of people who were all headed to Cold Spring Station, but none of whom he knew. Michael eventually started to have doubts about a guy who was always carrying a suitcase. The guy asked Michael if he was Pry, and when he said yes, the two started questioning him, wanting to know who he really was and threatening to get involved. Michael could tell the guy was quite competent by the way he battled back. Paradoxically, this strengthened Michael's belief that the guy was Pry even more. Therefore, he subtly placed the monitoring device Jonah had given him into the man's luggage during their argument. It seemed to Michael that his mission had finally been completed. Michael heard from Murphy shortly after that, and Murphy knew of Michael's situation. Murphy clarified that Pry had seen the death of a government worker who was thought to have committed a crime. But Pry knew that the government employee had been killed by the elite of the city, not guilty of the charges against him. Pry was supposed to testify today, and she was headed to Cold Spring Station to meet with an FBI agent. But it soon became clear that the powerful people in the city knew about this scheme and had tricked Michael into tracking down Pry in order to kill her. Michael realized that he had mistakenly set someone's death target using the tracking gadget. He looked to Murphy to help him keep his family safe. Soon later, Jonah called Michael again to let him know that he had accidentally put the tracking device in the incorrect person's luggage, which led to the man's death. Michael realized he had to find the genuine Pry quickly, since there were only 2 stations left before Cold Spring, or else his family would suffer greatly. He started looking for the guy again and found his corpse lying on the train floor. Unfortunately, Michael had unintentionally contributed to the killing of the guy who was an FBI agent assigned to Pry's protection. Michael eventually realized that one of the train's occupants was Jonah's accomplice. Michael had to hide from the authorities when the train stopped at a station, because another passenger had reported his unusual conduct. Michael was forced to hide behind the corpse of the dead agent because of his erratic behavior throughout the day. The cops who were looking for him were unable to find him. The door was locked from the outside, so Michael had a fresh problem when the train moved forward. He had to go back into the train from the outside, but it was hard since his bag became caught and his money flew everywhere. Once they were back on the train, Michael took the initiative to turn off the air conditioning and gathered the surviving passengers into one carriage that had working air conditioning. This calculated action would let him locate Pry in order to protect her from harm rather than to mark her. Michael felt compelled to defend an innocent person because his feeling of duty as a former police officer was rekindled. He could only fulfill Jonah's request as Cold Spring Station approached. Suspecting the passenger who was pretending to be Pry, Michael prepared to bring her to the front carriage for protection and equipped himself with a hatchet. His suspicions were unfounded, however, as the passenger revealed to be Jonah's accomplice and the reason for the FBI agent's death. As the train neared Cold Spring Station, the guy put pressure on Michael to tell who the actual Pry was. Relentlessly determined to protect her, Michael resisted, setting off a violent confrontation that culminated in Michael hurling Jonah's accomplice off the train. After that, Jonah phoned again, begging that Pry be found and that she be executed right away since the station was almost upon them. After a while, Michael recognized Pry as a lady among all the people on the train. Jonah contacted once again, demanding that Michael murder the man. Michael, however, angrily turned down the graphic request. Jonah replied with a foreboding prophecy that everyone will die. The communication stopped suddenly, and the train's engine and driver's cabin were severely damaged by a strong explosion. The train's brakes were off as it lurched ahead wildly. Jonah had a dark scheme here. If Pry lived, she would make sure the train never made it to Cold Spring Station. Michael hurriedly asked the train personnel for assistance in moving every passenger to the back compartment. Subsequently, he disconnected the back carriage from the remainder of the train, sparing it from a disastrous crash, but causing the front section to go off the rails. Michael collected all the passengers, telling them that the journey was far from done and that they should not get off just yet. To keep Pry's eyes off the inside, he asked everyone to cover the windows with newspapers. Now that the train was hidden, Michael spoke with Pry to find out what was really going on. Pry's story fit Murphy's description over the phone. She had seen a government employee killed. She shockingly revealed that a police officer was the culprit. Prior to the government employee's death, Pry claims the policeman used the term noble. Michael said that certain people were trying to stop Pry from testifying, that their goal was to kill her before she could go to Cold Spring. She was supposed to meet with an FBI agent at the station who would look out for her and her case. Michael was determined to protect her. Now, the seriousness of the situation was known to every person aboard the train. The police had shown up outside, spurred on by unfounded rumors that Michael had hijacked the train and abducted the passengers. That meant that capturing him was their main goal. There were also Captain Hauer and Murphy, who were good buddies. Michael was to be negotiated with by Murphy. His first thought upon boarding the train was for Michael's family's well-being. To make sure they were secure, he had gotten in touch with the FBI. Michael had been in touch with Murphy earlier in the day about a challenge, which confused him. Murphy used the term noble once in a phrase as he tried to talk sense into Michael's head and urged the passengers to be released. Michael looked across at Pry, who was cowering behind a seat out of dread. Murphy was specifically mentioned in Pry's account of the policeman who had murdered the government employee. After his deception was exposed, Murphy was unable to retract his involvement, especially after Jonah phoned and gave him the order to kill Pry. Murphy was stronger than Michael, but Michael never wavered in his resolve to keep Pry safe. A sharpshooter with X-ray vision outside the train informed Captain Hauer that Murphy was being attacked. Captain Hauer gave the sharpshooter a prompt order to kill Michael, but Michael was on the ground, snatching the X-ray marker from Murphy's clothes. The blue X-ray marking on Michael's palm led the sharpshooter with X-ray vision to incorrectly identify Murphy as Michael. Murphy was hit fatally by a shot fired by the sniper. The passengers came together to defend Michael as the police and FBI officers barged in prepared to take him into custody. Michael was praised as a hero. Michael's family was safe. According to an FBI agent who had been waiting for pry, 3 suspected people had been taken into custody close to Michael's home. Michael was at last able to exhale with relief, thanks to Pry's testimony and the FBI report. When word got out that Michael was, in fact, a hero who had spared a crucial witness to a murder plot involving the city's political elite, even implicating the mayor, the police started to understand the significance of his actions. Michael was accompanied by his spouse and kid, who had learned of the incident and were aware of his innocence. Captain Hauer also stopped by that evening, complimenting Michael on his knightly demeanor before grinning and leaving. A few days later, Jonah was seen lounging in one of the train cars. Without further ado, Michael came up to her and exposed her as the architect of the plot involving the death of the government employee and the train catastrophe. He flashed his police badge that evening, and the movie ends with this.